Commissioner, been looking forward to this conversation. I've got your comments in front of me on TikTok. You've called it before a clear and present danger to national security. I'm sure TikTok would disagree with that characterization as well. Can you give us some concrete examples, sir, of why you think that's the case?
Yeah, the track record with TikTok's malign conduct is very clear at this point. For years, they told U.S. lawmakers, don't worry, U.S. user data isn't even existing inside China. And then a blockbuster report came out in 2022 that showed no, in fact, quote, everything is seen inside of China based on leaked materials. That's keystroke patterns, biometrics, search and browsing history, location. Then second of all, what the CCP are doing with that data is very nefarious. They use access to that data, personnel in Beijing did, to surveil the locations of specific Americans, journalists, that were writing negative stories about TikTok. Third, TikTok said, okay, you caught us red-handed. We're going to wall off U.S. user data. But lo and behold, the Wall Street Journal report came out and found that personnel in Beijing are still getting access to that data, sensitive U.S. user data, after agreeing to wall it off. And the record goes on from there, including TikTok's parent, ByteDance, having a CCP cell embedded in its leadership. So this is about the malign conduct that an entity that is beholden to the CCP has been engaged in.
When you talk about walling off that data, you're talking about Project Texas. Has it not worked at all?
No, not at all. So one of the leaked materials had TikTok trust and safety officials themselves saying that it remains to be seen whether product and engineering, meaning Beijing, can still get access to U.S. user data after mitigations like Project Texas are put in place. Second of all, that walling off of data that we just talked about was part of Project Texas. And again, Beijing still got access to it. And even TikTok's CEO has said Project Texas will keep data from going to Beijing, except when we allow it pursuant to what they claim are new controls. So Project Texas is about as secure as a sieve at the end of the day.
In a day of interesting and odd political bedfellows, what we saw yesterday in Capitol Hill is a lot of individuals come out and talk about free speech on the progressive left and the right. Ron Paul saying he's going to block anything that's contrary to the Constitution. Do you agree? Is there a free speech issue at play here?
You know, look, Rand Paul's been great on these liberty issues. This particular bill does not trigger a First Amendment concern for one main reason. The Supreme Court has drawn a clear line between regulations based on content of speech on the one hand and regulation of conduct on the other. And this plainly is a conduct law, meaning we're acting because of the demonstrated malign national security threat of TikTok, not because of the content of anybody's speech. And the bill is narrowly tailored, which is key for First Amendment analysis, because it simply requires divestment, meaning the millions of Americans that love TikTok, I'm not one of them, but they can continue to use the application, but just in a more secure way. So because of the conduct at issue here, the Constitution does not compel us to require a national security threat to continue to persist.
Well, there's one politician in D.C. who certainly likes TikTok, and that's President Biden. In the sense of his campaign, they feel like they're able to reach the youth by using TikTok. So if TikTok is divested, there's a sale, would that mean that the Biden campaign can continue using it, but do you think it'll be safer?
Yeah, that's right. You know, a lot of people raise that concern about the Biden administration being on TikTok, but Biden administration officials have been very clear that there's a national security threat here. That's why passing this bill actually squares the circle, because then the campaign or anybody's campaign could continue or start to be on TikTok, but without that serious national security risk that's present today.
Commissioner, given the fact that we've heard that from President Biden, I'm curious about your comments from the former President Trump, who seems to be, I don't know, less clear about what he thinks of this bill, saying, you know, that there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad with TikTok, talking about how it increases the prevalence of Meta. What do you make of his comments?
Yeah, I think, first of all, President Trump, you know, fundamentally reshaped Washington, D.C. to understand the serious threat posed by the CCP. He's also raised concerns, as I have, with the conduct of big tech companies that are based right here in Silicon Valley. And those are real concerns. He pushed for Section 230 reform, which I supported and had hoped we would have gotten across the finish line at the FCC by now, and we haven't. But TikTok presents obviously sort of a threat that's fundamentally different than U.S. big tech companies. For all of my concerns with their conduct, and I have many, once we deal with the national security threat from TikTok, once you break that tie back to the CCP, then we should move very quickly, as President Trump has outlined, on Section 230 reform, and in my view, affirmative anti-discrimination obligation that would apply across the board. But until you break that link to the CCP, a lot of other reforms just aren't going to work out.
But it does feel like he flip-flopped on this in the sense that he wanted to ban it under his administration. It then got held up in court. And now he's saying he's really not so sure about it. Do you think we could see a different, if he was to become president of the United States, a different view on TikTok because of his concerns of how big Meta is?
Well, again, I think the reason why this bill is such a smart approach is because it's not a ban bill, it's a divestment. And so you would have TikTok go to a different, doesn't even need to be a U.S. company. It could be any company that's not tied to China, Russia, North Korea, or Iran. So you can continue to have TikTok in the marketplace as a counterweight to Facebook, as a counterweight to others, but it can be there in a way that doesn't present the national security threat. So it keeps that competition high.
Commissioner, we seem to be ill-equipped to deal with these issues. It's been 4 years, about 4 years since we've been talking about this, and hardly anything has happened just in terms of actually passing proper policy to do something about these national security concerns. I think back to China. It's easy, it's straightforward. She comes out and says no, and then that's it. It's banned, it's all banned. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, no access. Why are we so ill-equipped in the West to deal with these threats, and how do we go about changing that?
Yeah, we certainly have a very different system, obviously, than they do in China. And some people raise concerns about, will China engage in some sort of reciprocal action based on that? And I remind people, Facebook and other U.S. technology companies are already banned in China. So, yes, we move more slowly. We move in a much more considered way. And obviously, don't underestimate the fact that, ByteDance has put every single amount of lobbyist dollar possible to slow roll this. And people look at the 118th Congress and they say, they have a hard time getting things done as a general matter. But this is one where the 118th and Speaker Johnson can land a significant legislative win, not just on a tough issue, but as you know, on a technology issue where it's sometimes difficult for Congress to act. And that's why the Commerce Committee with Chair Rogers holding that blockbuster hearing last March, I think that really set things in motion. Do people wish it would have gone faster? Sure, undoubtedly. But arriving here today where there's a vote in the House is a significant moment.
Significant moment in the House, but what happens next in the Senate, Commissioner?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about the odds in the Senate as well. If you look back, actually, people sort of have forgotten this, but Senator Schumer joined in a letter with Senator Cotton back in 2019, raising serious concerns about TikTok's national security threat. So this is an issue that is a long-standing issue for Senator Schumer over there and many, many Republicans as well. So a lot of the focus has been in the House, obviously up to now. It will now shift to the Senate. But I think the odds are very good there as well. And I'm looking forward, hopefully, to the bill passing today in the House and then things moving over there.
Commissioner, I want to finish on conduct versus content. You talked about this being a conduct issue. Do you believe there is a content issue in any way, shape or form as well?
No, not at all. I mean, look, sometimes we focus on the way the algorithm with TikTok performs, and people have focused on that, how it just shows content that is drastically different than any other social media, content that happens to align with the CCP. Again, it's not that content that's the concern for me. It's that content shows that there's such a drastically different operation of the algorithm that it goes fundamentally to conduct into CCP control. So when we talk about that, again, it's just further evidence of CCP control. It's not about the government acting based on content. Again, I'll give you one last analogy. Someone can take a pen and they can write the most salacious anti-American propaganda they want. There's nothing, rightfully, the government can do. But if you take that pen and you use it to pick a lock and break into a building, well, that's illegal conduct. We can take the pen, and it's no defense for you to say that you were using it to write previously.